Hello, I'm Dhanya Rajendran, the editor-in-chief of the News Minute. Joining me in this session is Pooja Prasanna, my colleague. We both are going to be interviewing the Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, Mr. PTR, as he's known. So I want to begin with a very serious question. Why do you wear two watches?
That's a difficult question. Actually, no. I think sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, one day my mother found two old watches in a closet. And both were not functioning. And there were two old Rolexes, one from the 1940s or 50s and one from the 1960s. Anyway, I got them repaired when I was in the US. And one of them was my grandfather's and one was my father's. My father's was a manual wind, so I didn't have the patience for it. My grandfather's was an automatic. And so I wore that on my hand for, 20, 30 years to remind me of my grandfather and my legacy. Over the years, I started wearing wristbands. The first Fitbit that came, and then it became an HR Fitbit, and then it became various things. And eventually it morphed to this Apple Watch, which is a phone and a watch and everything. So for sentiment, I kept the Rolex on this hand, and I kept whatever technology changed every year or 2 years. I keep changing the technology on this hand, mostly for fitness and for phone, not for the watch. I don't know if it's coincidence or what, but about a week ago, my Rolex suddenly stopped working. And so with the lockdown, there's nobody to repair it. So I don't know, I was telling my wife, maybe I only needed to have that long enough to come back to politics now that I'm here. My ancestors live in me, and I don't need to wear that watch anymore. But I haven't had a chance to get it repaired. So whenever I get it repaired, I'll decide whether to wear it or not.
Because there are many rumors on the internet as to why you wear two watches. In fact, I heard someone saying it's because you like to look at American time and Indian time simultaneously. Why would you want to be doing that? Pooja?
No, there was a time when I was a global head in Stan Charter, when I ran the global offshoring platform, all global markets for Lehman, where I needed to know what time it was in various markets. But right now, I only care about what time it is in Madurai and in Chennai. So I don't need two watches for that.
Pooja, you want to say something before we kick off the questions?
No, I'm hoping for a fun session, given how feisty he is on Twitter. We're hoping he'll bring some of that fire to our session today. I know that he's going to try and address all the questions. The only job Dhanya and I had actually was to decide from that flood of questions that we had, which ones that we could actually accommodate. You are somebody who's gone beyond Tamil Nadu. People from across the country have a lot of things to ask. So I think we'll just get going right away, Dhanya.
Yes. So my first question to you, PTR, is a few days ago, we had a chat about the vaccination policy in which you were telling me that the union government believes in oligarchy, which is the reason why the whole vaccination policy is like this. The very next day, the Prime Minister made a speech in which a major change was brought to the vaccination policy, and the government said that they will be procuring all the vaccines, 75% of the vaccines, and will be giving to the states, 25% to the private sector. How do you see this new vaccination policy? And do you still believe that oligarchy persists?
Yeah, clearly it does. I still don't understand why it's only 75%. I mean, in most national emergencies, national disasters, the law is very clear. When I speak to the chief minister's secretaries here, who I've never been in government before, it's the first time for me. So when I ask questions about how we go through various processes, they say, both the Chief Secretary and the Chief Minister's secretaries tell us that under the Disaster Management Act, you can actually waive all conditions of even normal tenders and the normal checks and balances of procurement, because you need to procure, for the national interest. So if you have vaccine manufacturers in the country and you know their capacity, why would you not buy 100% of their production? Why, if there was ever a time for monopoly procurement, that time is now. So I find it hard to believe why we're only doing 75%. So for example, I had some people vaccinated recently in my team, and they charged 780 rupees per vaccine, 600 rupees for the vaccine at the rate that the seller, with the approval of the union government, set, plus 5% GST of 30, plus 150 service charge. Now, I'm well off, I can afford it, I'm not complaining. But surely the government should have procured 100%, sent it through the state mechanism, and then had, if somehow you couldn't actually inoculate through the government. In Tamil Nadu, for example, we have enough public health infrastructure that nobody should need to go to a private hospital for a vaccine. We can certainly do 100% of vaccinations. In Madurai district alone, we have 75 locations that are primary health centers. If need be, we can create another 50. So nobody should need to go to a private hospital. So there are times when you want to encourage private enterprise. Of course, we want to show investors and industrialists that we encourage healthy kind of profit-seeking driven growth. That's what normal capitalist models do. But to me, this seems like not very rational to me. It seems either both not very compassionate and not very rational. If it were up to me, I would say monopoly procurement, 100% of all production. And if you cannot produce, then I will take over and produce and make sure that we get everybody, inoculated as quickly as possible. And then we go back to private enterprise. And I don't think there's an investment banker or investor or industrialist in the world who would complain against that for this 6-month or 1-year period, including the fact that India is so important to the global economy that if you look at the pictures coming out of the G7 summit or in the UK or the US, people seem to be getting on with their lives without masks and everything. The economy is back. I don't know if you read in the Wall Street Journal how this is the fastest recovery in the history of the US because it's been such an unnatural shutdown. There was no crisis. There was no debt overhang. There was no economic decay. So, when it's so important to vaccinate and inoculate everybody so that you can get back to the economy, I still don't think this is far enough, actually.
But there is this comment which I see a lot of people making, that why can't we give 25% to the private sector? Because there are people in India who can afford to buy that vaccination. Why should they not be allowed to buy?
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of why can they not and why should we not give it to the private sector. I mean, this is a concept of public good versus, kind of niche good or luxury good. Just like we say that we should supply water through the corporation to rich and poor people. We don't say, let's supply drinking water only to the poor people and let the rich people find their own water. We build them differently. That's a different story. But we send it through the public distribution system of water. Electricity, we don't say let rich people have only their own generators. We sell electricity through the government board to everybody. This to me is a classic situation where the vaccine should be a public good. If the state, or for that matter, if the union, feels that there should be differential pricing, no problem. You say whoever has the ration card gets it for free. Whoever doesn't have a rice card gets it for 200. Whoever doesn't have any card, these things are secondary. It is the logistics and the procurement and the distribution that worries me. Because now you have a situation where big hospital chains will be able to buy what small cannot, right? If you have only 2 or 3 sellers, if you have an oligopoly, and then you have hundreds or thousands of hospitals trying to bid for this supply, surely either the manufacturers or the wholesalers or the regional dealers or somebody is going to be in a position of power to allocate. And then you're going to create inequality again. These are my concerns.
Prime Minister Modi, has recently said that while announcing, a flip-flop in a vaccination policy, he said that the states were asking for decentralization. When that was done, they went back and they said that this is, too much for us to handle. They bungled up. There was anarchy. Apart from Mamata Banerjee, we haven't heard any other state chief minister come out and ask for decentralization in terms of procurement or even funding for that matter. Are you aware of anything of this sort? Who asked and what kind of decentralization is it that the states were asking for?
Yeah, I think you're confusing 2 different things. I don't think anybody ever said decentralized procurement, right? I mean, you'd have to be pretty kind of short of IQ to say when there are only 2 manufacturers or 3 manufacturers in the whole country, to say decentralize and let hundreds or tens of people bid for it and create a lopsided market, that would be pretty inane. What states were asking for is, why should we have a central website where every single vaccination in the whole country should be registered? Why should that require some documentation like an Aadhaar when the Supreme Court has said Aadhaar is not necessary for services? Why should all those vaccination certificates be issued only by the union government? These are not realistic, kind of conditions. You have 1,300,000,000, almost 1,400,000,000 people. Let's say 1 billion or so of those need vaccination, leave out the below 18. Then how does it make sense that there's one website, one server, one logic, one system that all this should be done? That was what most people asked for decentralization in the implementation, in the administration, not in the procurement, right? We're not that silly. When there are only 2 or 3 manufacturers in India, when there's not enough supply in the world, you have a structural problem in the market because it's an oligopoly. Then you have a technical problem in the market because demand supply is out of whack. Under these conditions, which guy will go and say, make it an open buyer market so that we can compete? It's ridiculous. You can't compete. Why would anybody ask for a market where they compete without any kind of strength? Now you tell me it's 50 buyers, then I say it's a different, or 50 sellers, then I say it's a different market. But the confusion, and I don't want to put words into anybody's mouth, but I'm saying, how do you mistake diversified distribution and free up implementation from, how do you confuse that with diversified purchasing? I don't think anybody ever asked for diversified purchasing. It doesn't make sense. There are only that many sellers.
I think the notion has been created that states did ask for procurement. Pooja, go on.
Now, I was just asking a question slightly deviating from the vaccination conversation that we are asking. One thing that stood out since, the DMK came to power on the 7th of May, in all official statements, you have been referring to the union government particularly as Undriya Arasu, as opposed to what was being used before as Madhya Arasu. What was the need for this change particularly? Was it a strategy or is it something that you did?
Union government and not central government.
Yeah, listen, the Union of India is what every court case reads. The Union of India is what every Gujarat driving license shows. The Union of India is in the Constitution. The Union of India is what Justice Chandrachud referred to when he gave his interim remarks on the vaccination case. So I don't see anything wrong with the use of this is like an unnecessary debate, right? What does it matter what we call it? They are the ones that have all the direct taxation power. They have the bulk of indirect taxation power. They collect even the SGST and distribute it to us. We have backlog in even that. Of course, we need to get along with them. How does it make any sense? I mean, why should the whole logic of anybody's complaining? Some of the kind of, what can I say? I don't want to say. Some of the meanest intelligences in Tamil Nadu belong to the BJP IT wing and the BJP kind of social media. And these mean intelligences start off, we must have an NIA investigation for using the word union instead of central. I mean, it's like moronic, right? And this is like... The BJP stays at 3-4% vote share in Tamil Nadu, not because there are not enough adherents to their ideals, but because of the quality of their office bearers is so poor that they cannot ever grow. I mean, why? I don't understand why they don't get this. They have the worst human beings running their systems and their technology and their office, and then they say, "Oh, how come we don't grow?" It's not rocket science.
Okay, so now we're going to move to our members. We have Abhay with us. Abhay, you have actually given us 3 questions, but I want you to go ahead and ask the question about GST to Mr. PTR. Abhay, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Well, I had to put this background because my real background is kind of a little bit of a mess.
Very happy, no problem. Please go ahead with the question on GST. Like too many questions.
Yeah. So my question to you, sir. First of all, it's a great honor to actually interact with you personally, and I thank the News Minute for this. My question to you was, given that, the GST is a mess. Let me preface that with my question. It's a complete mess. Now, my question to you is, what would be the different ways from this point of time to actually come out of this mess, number one? And number two, is the solution going to be a political one or a non-political one? And 3, can any solution assure of economic autonomy for a particular state?
PTR, I just want to add another member's question to Abhay's question. Raghavan has asked, what can the state governments do to get more taxation powers from the union government, considering GST is there, especially when petrol, liquor, and real estate are inevitably brought under the GST? So if you can club both these and answer.
Yeah, why don't I answer all together on GST very quickly, 4 or 5 points. I don't see any day that either the union or the states urge the movement of petrol, diesel, and alcohol into GST, at least under the current circumstances. There are multiple reasons why, not least of which is that the whole infrastructure is shaking already. The GST system is not workable in its current form. And the last thing that either the union or the states would want is to bring their biggest revenue sources into the GST. The bigger picture questions that were asked, yes, it is a mess, but I think it's fixable. So in my, call it opening statements as a first-time member of the GST Council, I had written a fairly long, statement, and I had asked the Honorable Union Finance Minister. I said, I don't want to bore everybody. I want to be sensitive of everybody's time. So can I just submit this and you take it as read into the minutes? And she very graciously agreed, and she took it, and she said, the way I will make sure it's taken as read is that I will circulate it to all 31 states. And she did. She took it and she sent it to all 31 states. And I made all these points. I said, here are all the flaws, and from an operational and design perspective, here are all the ambiguities from a constitutional perspective. What is the real authority? Who holds it? How is it exercised? What does consensus mean? What happens? And you got to understand something. The GST Council is an advisory body. Whatever decision we make in the GST Council, the states have to go back and implement amendments to their commercial tax laws, the state commercial tax laws, to implement what the GST Council agreed. The union government has to go and pass that equivalent bill for the IGST and the CGST in the parliament, in both houses. So it's a system that requires everybody to agree to implement things irrespective of whether they like it or not. And it's this consensus, again, without going into too much detail, this meeting that we had yesterday, the follow-up meeting, there was this whole debate about, is it unanimous, is it not unanimous from the group of ministers, and then what that means for the council. And I asked the question, I said, I hope the Honorable Union Finance Minister doesn't imply that consensus means unanimous. Because unanimous, it's like a bit like Orwellian 1984 Big Brother, like we're all in groupthink. Consensus can mean that we agree because of the greater good or because we understand we're in the minority, but not because our intent is that way. So, for example, yesterday I said, I commend the group of ministers' work. I'm sure that they did it in good faith. I disagree with the outcome. Mathematically, I think it's a few hundred or a couple thousand crores at most for the Union of India or for the states, 31 states, to be split. For Tamil Nadu, it probably means 3 crores or 5 crores in revenue. I think it is more important to send the message of compassion to the people that we put these at zero than to tax these at 5%. So, but having said that, I realize we're in a minority. So I register my dissent, and then the overall number of states, because of the one state, one vote, they all agree, and it comes out. And she was kind enough, apparently. I had to leave because after some time, I thought it would be like a 2-hour meeting. It ran for 4 hours, something. After like 3.5, I had already given other appointments and meetings. I left the meeting, but apparently the Honorable Union Finance Minister brought it up again and said, I agree with the Honorable Minister from Tamil Nadu that unanimous is not a requirement for consensus. People can still have differing views. And so this is a system that is shaky. Now I go to the last point, which is that I think it's fixable, but we'll know soon enough, because the way this will break, in my understanding, the way this will break is not with a bang. It will break with a whimper. What if we refuse to come back and implement a law or an amendment to the law in our assembly? Let's say we all agreed it's going to be 5%. What if we come back and pass a law that is 0%? What happens then? Now, do you have different SGSTs? What if we come back and don't pass any amendment to the law at all? What happens then? So this system requires so much cooperation and so much coordination that unless we can fix this, I think we are not got a bright future. There's now a final question, which is this a model that is sustainable irrespective of, let's even say this was perfectly designed GST, and let's even say the union was not taking out this much tax and cess. It is still a problem we have because, as I have pointed out, this is not a parochial concern. If I look at it at a global perspective, India is by far the most centralized country in the world. And that was true before this regime took office in 2014. The constitution was designed to try and create a country where there had been none in the history. For 2000 years, our cultures existed, our people existed, but there had been no country known as India. So in the process of creating that, the constitution vested a whole lot of powers with the union and relatively less with the states. But, at the risk of repetition, I say, in communist China, on one end of the spectrum, the cities have different police departments. The cities issue industrial permits. The counties kind of give environmental clearance. The states issue banking licenses, the provinces. You can't get a China-wide banking license. Standard Chartered Bank has to get a different license in every province. In America, the towns run the school boards. The towns run the police. When I lived in the town of Amherst, we had a different school board in the town of Amherst, a different school board in the village of Williamsville next door. They had different police. We had different policies. There is a Erie County sales tax. There is a Erie County liquor law. It is a county, state, city. This is where regulation and revenue collection resides. India is the only place where it was already one-sided, where everything was in Delhi. And now it's gone much worse after the last 7 years. Ironically, under a prime minister who was the greatest champion of federalism when he was 13 years chief minister. Now, my point is, sooner or later, we will have to find ways to devolve power to the states. Otherwise, we're going to see some serious problems, developing in the next few years.
But PTR, just to quickly ask you, how do you suggest that the union government devolve more power to the states before we go to the next member?
Both indirect and direct taxation and in policy making should be devolved to the states. I mean, there is a clear role for the union. The union is about interstate commerce, about overseas commerce, about foreign relations, about defense, about monetary policy control, about keeping the value of money. All of these things sit with the union. The rest of it, whether the union designs or decides or does anything about it, it still has to be implemented in the states, in the districts, in the cities, in the villages. So trying to have this one-size-fits-all sitting in Delhi, and the CAG report shows it. Every year, there is a failure to spend the money in the Swachh Bharat and the Krishi Kalyan and all these things. Every year, the union fails to achieve its cess, its targeted expenditure in every cess. And then they take back 30, 40, 50,000 crores surreptitiously back into the consolidated fund and don't divide it to the states anyway, even on the take back. So, the failure is very obvious. You cannot drive implementation. My best guess is the union government has something like 2 million employees. We are a country of 1.38 billion or something. How do you drive programs with 2 million employees if you're lucky? And that includes the PSUs and all that, right? You have to rely on the states. And so if you're going to have the states do the implementation and the follow-up, like Swachh Bharat, they build the toilets, but there's no water supply because the water supply is a municipal matter. It's not a union government matter. The union government can give you the grant to build the toilet. Then who makes sure there's continuous water supply? That municipality, that village, that township. So this disconnect needs to stop.
Yeah, and the pandemic has actually shown this whole confusion as to what is a state subject, what is a central subject as far as health goes. Pooja, you want to call in the next member?
Yeah, Guru Sarvanan is waiting to ask his question. He has something to ask about local governments. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I am Guru Sarvanan from Rajapalayam, working as a chairperson for a development organization called Institute of Grassroots Governance. In recent times, you spoke about the importance of decentralization, which is going to be a crucial factor for the development of Tamil Nadu. Since we work with elected village panchayat presidents, and there are a lot of grassroots level challenges has been there. So I would like to ask a couple of questions based on our observations from the field. The previous ADMK government has not released the rural local government grants on time, as well as there is no transparency mechanism which shows that how much fund has been allocated to a particular village panchayat. If you see in Kerala government, they add a separate appendix, which indicates so-and-so fund has been allocated to panchayat in their budget. So I just want to ask, can we expect these sort of like initiatives which promote transparency? And I want to ask in general, like what sort of the plans that present government have to strengthen local government finance? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think these are all good questions. Of course, there's an old joke. I think it was a famous Indian economist, I forget his name now, who said everybody wants decentralization only up till their level. So when you sit in the union, you say, I decentralize to the union, then in the states, you say state. But I have been very clear, and we have implemented this in practice. Even in our Corona counter strategy, we devolved and decentralized, and that's how we were able to bring Madurai from a peak of 1,500 around May 14th to about 250 cases yesterday. That quickly. Most other districts have not had that kind of a turn. But let me answer that 2-3 ways. I say I am an open admirer of the fact that Kerala is decentralized a lot more than most states. I'm on record from 1.5 years ago saying one of the reasons they did so well in the corona containment on the first wave is because they empowered local bodies to do things. Without going into politics, I'd say the lack of release of funds or the lack of transparency is the least of the sins of the last regime. They didn't run any local body elections at all for 4 years for the bulk of Tamil Nadu. And for my constituency, for example, they have not run it, period. So for 5 years, I served as the equivalent of 22 corporation ward councillors plus 1 MLA. On the bright side, I learned a lot about the problems of basic life that ought to have been managed by the corporation, about drinking water and general use water and sewage and garbage and street lights and roads and things like that. But those are local body subjects under normal circumstances. That's not an MLA's day job. That is a councillor's day. So not having elections is the height of it. So, I shouldn't go much further than that. I can't criticize you more than saying you didn't even run the election. In our case, we have a lot of plans because local self-governance was always one of the principles of the Dravidian movement going back to the Justice Party. I would say we should have probably done more in the bigger picture, the strategic. As I say, Kerala has done more than us, maybe because of a series of communist governments. And maybe that philosophy is even more distributed than the Dravidian philosophy. But I can assure you that we will strengthen in multiple ways. I don't want to talk too much because the governor's address is due in about a week. And then, there'll be the reply to the governor's address, and I will present a budget, and there'll be a debate, and there'll be a reply. But I can assure you that by the time we're done with the reply to the budget, there will be a series of steps announced, both in terms of greater devolution, plus greater monitoring, plus greater transparency. I'll add one more thing. The 6th Finance Commission of the state of Tamil Nadu, the State Finance Commission, much like the Indian 15th Finance Commission, its term was scheduled to end in the near, like June 30th, for implementation starting fiscal year 22-23. Because of COVID and because of other things, they have not finished, so they've asked for an extension. And it has been a godsend to me because I took all the comments that I had given to the 15th Finance Commission on behalf of the DMK when they came about incentivization, about indexation, about not trying to predict things you cannot. When I said we in the state, when I look at the history of the state, we are not able to do the 2-year forward projection in the required FRBM, FRA, medium-term fiscal plan with any accuracy. Those numbers look like nonsense. When you look at the 2 years ago projected budget of this year and the actual budget of this year, they're like random numbers. If one state cannot predict its own future or project its own future 2 years forward, how are you, the Union Finance Commission, looking at 31 states at the center, projecting their revenues and their outcomes 2 years forward for 5 years, so 7 years forward from when they start the projection calculation. And based on that, you allocate in a firm formula things that, of course, your projections are never ever going to come true. You have 1 in a million chance of getting them right, or less. You can win the lottery with greater likelihood than that. So it should be flexible. It should be incentive driven. It should be based on interim performance measures, etc. So I had the luxury of having that conversation with Mohan Pyare, the retired IAS officer who's chairing the State Finance Commission. And I encouraged him that what we have preached to the center, let us implement some of those things in the devolution. Because as you know, the State Finance Commission talks of devolution from the state to the local bodies. So I said, let's bring in those principles into our Finance Commission report, which we will gladly try to implement. And let us show the country how it ought to be done. Because the 15th Finance Commission certainly didn't go nearly as far as we had asked. So I think, step by step, the first will be over the next 2 months, 3 months. And then when the 6th Tamil Nadu State Finance Commission report comes out, you'll see we are really innovating a lot on devolution to the local bodies.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Can we go to Viswak next? Viswak, are you here? Sorry, Pooja, I'm just cutting the order. Viswak, are you here?
Yeah, okay. So my question is also about states' rights. So given the context currently where, the center is constantly trying to encroach on states' rights, I think Mamata Banerjee recently proposed a political union of states of sorts so that there can be some sort of collective bargaining. I wanted to ask whether you consider this a realistic prospect. And I don't mean in terms of, the desirability of such an arrangement, but actual, the pragmatic feasibility of something, an arrangement like that.
Again, I have a breadth of experience in history, so I'm short depth. So I would say that in my understanding, there used to be something called the Council of the States, where the states used to meet and interact with each other. Somebody can maybe chime in who's better informed than me when I finish. And I think it's high time it was revived. I think certainly state-to-state discussions, and I think state-to-center discussions, if you look at my note on the GST, I pointed out that one of the problems with the GST Council is it is the only semi-formalized avenue for state-to-center discussions or union discussions on finances, right? Really, there ought to be a whole lot of other avenues. There's not enough. The GST Council is not the place to talk about borrowing limits. Nobody in the Constitution invents that the GST Council, which didn't exist at that time, should have those kinds of powers. So I think there's a huge lack of communication avenues and therefore communication state to state. And I'm not talking about politically. I'm saying, to me, states' rights are states' rights, irrespective of whether the party in the union and the party in the state are the same or not. We are starting to see that. I'm starting to see in the GST Council that members of states who are run, which have governments of the same political inclination, the same party as the union, are actually starting to talk a bit out of line, saying, actually, for my state, this would be better. I'm told that they were very much kind of willing to sacrifice their states' rights for the political good earlier. Maybe it's hearsay, so I'm not accusing anybody. But even now, there's a clear distinction. And I'm not just talking about DMK or TMC or Congress. I'm saying all those states that do not have a kind of single party BJP or BJP dominated coalition government talk a lot louder about states' rights, but the rest of them are not mute. They are starting to talk more their citizens' benefits rather than kowtowing mindlessly to the union's rights. And so I think sooner or later, this notion of a council of states or a conference of states or a discussion of states is inevitable. I can say in the short time, in the kind of less than 4 weeks or maybe 5 weeks that I've been in my seat, I've certainly built linkages with the finance ministers of several other states to the point where I'd say the finance ministers of Kerala, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, Andhra, Telangana, we have all talked about getting together or visiting each other or having ongoing discussions about, the future of taxation, of states' rights, whatever. Some of them I knew personally, but many of them I did not. But I think it's not just required, it's not just practical, it's not just feasible, it's going to happen. The only question is what form and how quickly. But these things are going to happen.
So do you plan to mobilize all the finance ministers so that collectively you can ask for a better, bargain from the union government?
Yeah, I remember Vijay actually also sent the same question.
Yeah, I mean, who am I? I came to this job 6 weeks ago. Who am I to mobilize anybody? Either my leader will mobilize based on his vision, or other people will take the initiative. I'm happy to participate. And some of this is just human nature in the sense that, other than a few kind of really, unfathomable brains, across the political spectrum, we are here to do the right thing for the people. And I include the Honorable Union Finance Minister in this group, that most of the time we talk about what's good for the people, and we understand that we may have political kind of compulsions to go one way or the other, but we talk in good faith. In fact, let me go the other way. Let me say something very, very clearly. In the GST Council meeting yesterday, single agenda GST Council that I thought at worst would take 2 hours, no more, and I arranged my day accordingly. And then it ran on and I couldn't stay for more than 3.5 hours. I had people waiting in my office for an hour, hour and a half. In that council, things started to take a little bit of a turn for a bad situation. And the Honorable Union Finance Minister, multiple times, twice, stepped in to say, listen, in this forum, we assume everybody speaks with good faith. We assume that everybody is talking what is good for their people and what is good for their state. And therefore, there should be no personal castigation. There should be no insinuation of intent or politics or whatever. You just maintain that decorum. That's the way we operate. And that's exactly how most civilized people go into a discussion, right? This little kerfuffle I had with the minister of another state was because that minister went and ran off some press conferences and did some other things. Otherwise, the meeting finished after 9 hours at 8:30 at night. Suddenly, I didn't call the press. I went home and met my family and had dinner and got on with my work. The next day, I heard about it. I didn't react. Only the Friday evening press conference appeared in the Monday morning papers as statements in multiple national papers all the way to Tamil Nadu. Then I reacted. Because otherwise, it's a fool's game to take this outside, right? We are not playing a single part game. This is not like one time you win and you're done. We are here for the long run. We are here for a marathon kind of series of meetings and decisions and follow-ups. It is in our interest to get along. Of course, we'll have differences. Unanimous is not a prerequisite for consensus. We are not expecting groupthink and we are not willing to go groupthink. I used the word self-respect in the meeting yesterday. I said, I cannot agree with this because I have self-respect. I come from a movement that values self-respect. I appreciate their work. I'm sure they did it in good faith. But with my self-respect, I cannot acquiesce to this. So I register my dissent. Now you may still vote over me and call it consensus. I have no problem. I'm not going to go out and make any press conference about this, right? I'm not going to grandstand about this. We still got, we'll have to come back for the next issue and the next issue and the next issue. So we are reasonable people. We are not looking to take, political fights. This is a job with a lot of responsibility. I am certainly not the firebrand or the lightning rod that is going to bring everything together. I do my job. First time I'm doing this job. I'm learning it. I'm doing it. The leader will tell us which way to go. The chief minister will tell us which way to go. Or people who have been doing this a long time, like the Honorable Chief Minister of West Bengal, who's been doing it for decades, and has been a union minister and has been state chief minister multiple times. Or other people will tell us. And if my chief minister says, go and attend, I go and attend. Or he says, host, I'll host. I may even host. But it'll be because my chief minister says so, not because I say so.
PTR, I know there's lots of member questions, but I have to ask you this very quickly. For many years, I've been hearing about this revival of Council of State. Mr. Thomas Isaac from Kerala, he in fact did do rounds of these finance minister meetings. There have been some sort of cooperation between states. But why is there no real push? Is it because, like for example, Jagan Mohan Reddy wouldn't want to speak against the union government at points of time. KCR is red today, black tomorrow. We don't know what mood he is in. So are there too many political obstacles really for states to come together and really plan something out like that?
Yeah, listen, we're all in active politics. We all expect to stand for elections. We all have to worry about, if we have skeletons in our closet, and usually the behavior tells you the extent of skeletons, right? So I'm not naive, but I'm saying, our state's motto is "Vaimaye Vellum," truth alone triumphs. Sooner or later, if black is black, then black is black. How many ever ways you try and call it white, it doesn't become white. It is still black. So it is not a workable model. You can see, you concentrate all the power in the world into one place of the union government at one pinpoint or two human beings. Then you will find that you fail at execution. Then you'll find the economy fails. Then you'll find that you cannot control the crisis of the pandemic. Then you have to start to kind of unwind the trade, The problem, even in the markets, right? I spent kind of 20 years of my life in the global markets. What Keynes said, the markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. You see a short, you see this thing is overvalued, you short it, and you'll find it keeps on rising for another 5 years. You can't keep making the margin calls, you get broke, and then it will crash. When it crashes, it will crash to the right price. It will go from 200 to 5 or 8 or 7. But by that time, you'd be broke. So on the one hand, I agree with you, the perception of political power, and in fact, I'll blame the media for this, if you don't mind. The media projects the kind of power that the ruling dispensation in Delhi simply does not have. I'm not blaming you personally, I'm saying the media overall. I'm saying the last time that the BJP won an election outright in a massive way was the UP election of 2017 post-demonetization, when they won 300 out of 400 seats. Every other time it either squeaked through or by post or marginally, or Bihar, 0.12%, or, Form 20 is not released for 2 months after the election with kind of a lot of surreptitious movement on the EC, right? Or Karnataka, where they bought after, they to collapse the government. So I'm saying this notion that somehow this invincibility is existing in one or two men who are like, godlike in their power is just a fallacy. It's a charade. And the media perpetuates and kind of aids that charade. And sooner or later it'll break. Again, I'm saying bigger people than this have fallen, right? Empires have fallen. Markets have crashed. So it will break. It will break, and it will break calamitously. The question is, what is the timing? When I had some conversations with some other colleagues of mine in the government, I said, when I was in the markets, I realized I can see what's coming, but I'm probably like 2 years too far ahead of my time. So I started cutting my risk bets like that as a trader. Yes, I know this is overvalued. Yes, I know it's undervalued, but the market's probably going to take longer to get there than I think it is. And therefore, I might lose a lot of money in the middle, and I try to control myself. So same way I'm saying, I think the tide has started to turn. I think, in my opinion, the kind of recent election results and the narrative in the global media, if not the Indian media, starts to seem like the tide has started to turn, and more the truth and the inevitable outcome. Devolution is inevitable. If you centralize anymore, you will have even worse disasters than the ones you have on your hand now, economically and pandemically. So sooner or later, the system will break. Now we'll see how long that takes.
Okay. We'll take a question from Devi, our member who's waiting. Devi, go ahead.
Yeah, Vanakkam Anna. Very happy to see you and meet you. We are a big fan of you. Okay, I'll put my question in short. Being a tax-paying citizen for years, okay, so would you vouch for similar to the GST state and central? So would it be the state part and the central part? So in my tax, it's always my company's head branch that is in Bengaluru. Okay, so I would be happier to contribute to I contribute to say Chief Minister Relief Fund than the PM Cares. I'd feel happier to contribute to state in my income than equally to the central, maybe.
He's saying, why not the state share?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me rephrase the question, if you don't mind. Should states have the power for direct taxation? Answer is absolutely yes. Every other country in the world, they do. We are the only country that doesn't. Sooner or later, it has to happen here. And it will. It's an inevitability. There's no way that a state of 80 million people in Tamil Nadu's case, or 200 million people in Uttar Pradesh case, can run without some form of direct taxation power, and it will happen.
So would you voice for that?
Of course. No, of course.
Did we see you as the future Finance Minister of India very soon?
Amma, please. I am very happy in the job I have. I never envisioned I'll have this job. This is as high as I want to go in politics. I committed to my wife, just like when I was an expat banker, I committed to my wife, you stay in Chennai and keep the kids here and keep my mother taken care of. Wherever we are in the world, I'll make sure we spend 60% of the nights under the same roof, whether that is our house in New York or Chennai or Madurai or Singapore or elsewhere. I did it for 5 years. I kept a spreadsheet and I did 3 days more than 60% of the nights. Same way I committed to her, I'll come to politics at 50, I'll exit at 60. I have no intention of breaking my word to my wife. I'm very happy to do the job I'm doing. I have no intention to take any other job than this. No ambition, no intention. I'm very happy where I am. Please.
We'll check back with you in 10 years. We'll see where that.
Thank you, Devi. We'll go to the next question. Mauli has a question. Mauli, are you there?
Good evening, sir. So my question is about the impact on economy due to the exclusion of LGBT persons in the current situation. So yes, we have had recent judgments and summons which are in support of the queer community. But I leave that aside. And so the question, my question is based on a report by World Bank in 2014. The report is called The Economic Cost of Stigma and Exclusion of LGBT People, a case study of India. So it says the partial cost of homophobia in India is estimated to about 0.1 to 1.7% of the GDP. So it's been 7 years now from 2014. So I don't know what it is currently, but there has also been various studies that shows the loss businesses have due to exclusion of queer persons from the workforce, or due to the discrimination that they face in the workforce. So my question to you is about the loss to the Indian Union and to the state of Tamil Nadu due to this exclusion of the vast talent pool that we have due to prejudice. So as the Minister of Finance and Human Resource Management of Tamil Nadu, what are your views on this? And do you have a plan to address this exclusion through government policies and interventions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have not done any quantitative assessment of the cost. The two fundamental principles, one from the Dravidian movement and one from my professional experience, is that there's no upside to discrimination on any basis, and there's always upside to diversity in every dimension. So on that basis, both when I was in my professional career as a banker in the US at global levels in Singapore, we welcomed all the countries that became more progressive and ensured the rights of all people of all orientations. My party certainly has that philosophy. From Kalinga's time till now, we have ensured transgenders at least get equal rights. And in fact, we have nominated, my chief minister has nominated a transgender person to the State Planning Commission for the first time, which is part of my department, the planning department. My good friend, lawyer Manu Sundaram, was the counsel on the recent judgment in the Madras High Court case. We welcome the judgment in the Delhi case, decriminalizing this thing. I must say that I have not so far, either quantitatively or qualitatively, either through surveys or through questionnaires or whatever, undertaken an assessment of the costs. My philosophy is very clear. I am against discrimination and I am for inclusion on every basis, including orientation. And any chance we get to formulate policy that way, we will go that way. I'm not well versed enough to talk about the impact or the extent. I will try and be by the time we have one of these conversations next time. I just don't know. I don't have enough data. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
We'll go to Mr. Ganapati, who's waiting to ask your question.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Thiagarajan. It's by way of introduction, I'm chairman of Trident Technologies, which is the company that has developed the COVID software for the country. Much maligned at times, much support, much praised at times. And to set the context, we are a global Indian multinational. We are IT vendors for the United Nations. And of course, therefore, being an IT company, for us, the mother country is the United States. The principles, sir, that show sustainable high growth environments, which you are familiar with in Silicon Valley and Route 128 in Boston, are characterized by 4 important elements that feed on each other to create a virtuous cycle. The existence of leading academic institutions where cutting-edge innovations are born, the presence of a large and mobile, technically competent and talent pool, the availability and easy access to significant amount of risk capital, and of course, the corporate culture of innovation and acquisition, which make these startups flourish. The last of these offer the big wealth creation opportunities that then trigger the other 3 to keep happening again and again. I now speak in my capacity as chairperson of the IIT Madras Entrepreneurs Forum, which is a global virtual forum where almost all of us have been successful entrepreneurs. So I wish to take this opportunity to check with the government of Tamil Nadu, and is this our assessment? The first 2 elements are there, and we should be able to support the government with the third one, that is the risk capital, basis our own involvement in this. And with a little bit of intervention and basis our own experience, from 2013 up until now, I can tell you that nothing succeeds like success, having worked with the IIT incubation cells and a few tech startups beyond. Will the government of Tamil Nadu, and before Devi's desire of you becoming Union Finance Minister arrives on the table, would you be willing and able to discuss with us and give us some time where we can present your roadmap to ensure that Tamil Nadu adopts the Route 128 of Boston and the Silicon Valley, with which many of us are familiar, and we can take it forward?
There's too many questions back. Maybe we can start with the answers.
Yeah, listen, I think part of politics is to be kind of very, what can I say, proper. And so I'm the finance minister. I'm not the industries minister. I'm not the IT minister. I'm not the small scale industries minister. So I am reluctant to go too far beyond my brief. I will just say that both with the CII interaction, plus with SICI yesterday, plus with my good friend Gopal Srinivasan, I think, who's the head of the
I've
venture
been past
capital.
president of SICI also, sir.
Yeah, venture capital. So multiple people have made presentations to us or given us soft kind of concepts. I think we are for it. I think we believe that Tamil Nadu has the potential to be very high up on the value chain in terms of innovation in software as a service, in fintech, in kind of, what can I say, new, on the boundary of innovation in IT. But it's not my day job. So I will facilitate as best as I can. There are many people who have come to us with plans. We have discussed some at length. You know, we've been in office about 4 weeks or 5 weeks. So just give us some time. I can assure you that we will pay a lot more attention to it, and that we will, we will tap the Tamil diaspora in the technology industry. I personally, for example, between my MIT classmates and my other US university classmates, and particularly of the Tamil diaspora that I knew when I was in the US, you know, they are all in very, very, very senior positions, maybe in the top 10 or 15 officers at places like Google, at Facebook, at Apple, at Square, at all these companies. So, yeah, when the time is right, you know, we are trying to get over the second wave and get our feet on the ground and understand, you know, my party has not formed the government for 10 years. So there's a lot of things that decay in a 10-year gap. We're still only about a third of the way through even getting the right IAS officers into the right seats. So it's a bit early. It's not my field, but I give you the commitment that were we to have this conversation 3 or 6 months from now, you know, I don't think you'd feel that we had shortchanged anybody in your line of sight.
PTR, before we move to the next question, I have a political question for you. The other day, I was watching one of your interviews in which you were saying that perhaps the Prime Minister's communication is not correct because the speech which he makes comes in Hindi. This is, in fact, your comment was before the current speech by the Prime Minister. I was watching the speech this time, and this time too, there was no translation. And what struck me is that they have enough, bandwidth to actually translate this into all languages much before, make sure that every regional Doordarshan runs it. So I'm starting to think that this is a deliberate strategy, that they do not want to communicate beyond this, that they want to only communicate in Hindi, perhaps. What is your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, who am I to attribute motives to others, right? Only the outcome is visible to us. So first of all, I want to clarify, I had no intention of becoming a meme or disrespecting anybody. I asked a simple question. If it is a language you don't understand, how many human beings sit in front of a television and watch anything for 20 minutes, even a movie that you cannot understand the language? If there's no subtitles and you cannot understand the language, it is a natural reaction that you don't, sit there for 20 minutes. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful or, become a meme that I seem to have become when I see all these photos. But it is, I do what human beings naturally do. So then the question arises, can they not do it? Your answer is, of course they can. Then the question arises, why do they not do it if they can? And it could be that it is intentional. But in my own view, if you ask me to make a guess, just as a trader, I rarely duck a question. You have to make a price, so you have to say where the bid and offer is. My own view is not that they deliberately do it. Is my own view is that the government is that dysfunctional. It is not that they cannot. It is not that they haven't heard the feedback. But at some level, among the problems and the issues they face, they don't see this as important enough to do. That would be my bet. And I gave the example in the other case where
because the BJP's main thing is about communication, right? I mean, they came to power.
Yeah, which is shocking. So which is shocking. Which is what I'm telling you, that when it comes to elections, they seem to go all out. But even there, I tell you, in the 2016 election, and to some extent in the 2021 election, but the 19 election, the entire advertisement campaign of the BJP in the 2019 parliamentary election run online in Tamil Nadu was all in Hindi. And I made the point, I'll make it again. Running Hindi advertisements in Tamil Nadu is worse than running no advertisement at all. Because not only will people not understand, but it will be clear to people that you don't even care enough to convert the message to something they can understand, and therefore how little you care for them. So I think, in my own opinion, I don't think it is, nobody wants to hurt themselves, right? No, even the strong man doesn't want to necessarily look weak. Now, it could be an ego issue that having brought it up, they don't want to admit they're wrong. That would be my second choice. My first choice is the system is overwhelmed, right? They're in the middle of a pandemic. The economy is in the doldrums. They don't seem to be making any headway. They collate all the power. They cannot get any outcome. The global media at least has turned. The state elections are starting to turn. The local media seems to be kind of on the verges of finding its backbone. And then all of a sudden, is this the most important thing that they can do? Probably not. That's why they probably haven't done it.
So two of these things I noticed here, PTR is being kind, one. Second is that he's saying the local media is sort of finding its backbone. And third, for those who didn't understand the meme that he's talking about, is an interview. He said, I don't listen to the Prime Minister's speech. I don't have time. So that became...
No, I didn't say I don't have time. I said I have many things to do. Why would I sit for 20 minutes in front of a TV I can't understand? That's all I said. Will you do that? Will you sit for 20 minutes in front of a TV you can't understand?
I have a colleague called Sayukta who actually translates it live for me. So I just keep looking at that Google Doc.
I don't have that luxury. That's why I don't sit in front of the TV.
Pooja.
So, I think we'll just go to our next member, Sujata, who wants to ask you a question.
This is for the minister, a question which, affects majority of the women in Tamil Nadu. So we have a lot of taxation coming from liquor, and the revenue income actually is something that the state depends on so much. So how do we hope or expect that the government would actually reduce its dependence on liquor revenues? Is there any plan to have the DMK government fund social welfare and development with non-liquor taxation or revenue? These are just some questions that we have. I mean, I don't think...
Yeah, I think we should first look at the scale of these things.
If I could just add one more related question, your current decision to also, with restrictions, of course, open TASMAC has come under a lot of fire because it's almost like a full circle. Last May, your leader and all of you were on the streets demanding, with black flags, demanding that they should not be open. And now you've gone ahead and done the same. So was it a financial decision? What prompted you to take that decision?
Yeah, I'll start from the little to the big. The little is, I don't know. I wasn't in the room when the discussion was taken, but when the decision was taken, I'm not part of the kind of, lockdown and relaxation committee. But I will say that this is the fourth relaxation, right? We started with 1 week, then the second week, then the third week, this is the fourth week. So the first 3 weeks, they didn't relax. So which relaxation comes at which step of the going to total open? I don't know. I assume that whoever makes the decision makes it based on some variables. I was not in the room, so I don't know. If I was, I would certainly tell you what I said or what I understood. But there's a bigger picture question here, which is really people overestimate what the TASMAC is to the state of Tamil Nadu. And I have been on record in opposition, so I'll repeat that here. The government of Tamil Nadu's budget will be somewhere around 3 lakh crores. Under a normal system, we should have borrowed only about 65,000 crores. But because of the way the economy has been badly managed, we are going to probably be on track to borrow 90 or 85 or 90, 95,000, depending on whether the union government releases or relaxes the borrowing limit or not. And so in that context, I first point out every single time that the government of Tamil Nadu has lost 3.5% of its GSDP between 2014 and now. I'm not talking about 98, I'm not talking about 60, I'm talking about 2014, till Ms. Jayalalitha had been in control, and now the government of Tamil Nadu's revenues, state's own revenues, both tax and non-tax together, have dropped from 10.5% of GSDP to 7% or so. That's between 60 and 70,000 crores a year. I'm not the only one. The CAG has pointed that out, the RBI has pointed that out, the 15th Finance Commission has pointed out, the 14th Finance Commission's estimates of what we should have earned and what we did earn show that gap. So it is kind of, inarguable. So now the question is, what is the total revenue that comes from TASMAC? And I think the revenue is about 30,000 crores. So if you ask me, is TASMAC required for the government of Tamil Nadu to survive? I would say probably not. If I had that 70,000 crores, then surely I can afford to give up this 30,000 crores. You ask me a different question. Do you think that TASMAC revenue is net positive? My answer, probably not. We probably get 30, 32 or 34,000 crores in revenue that we can record. The social costs of alcoholism, of unchecked kind of domestic abuse, of absenteeism, of lack of productivity, of accidents, of loading on the public health system is probably much higher than that, but we don't know how to calculate that, or at least we have not done till now. If you ask me, should alcohol be regulated and taxed? The answer is absolutely yes. Everywhere in the world, there are sin taxes, and everywhere in the world, we regulate it. We don't want young people and abuse happening. If you ask me, is it possible that you can affect a total ban? I say from an implementation perspective, it's going to be almost impossible unless every state in India, and we bar all shipments and we stop flights from bringing it in. Otherwise, you're going to have a black market and you're going to have illicit alcohol distilling and the methanol related deaths that come from it and so forth. So there has to be a middle ground. And there are so many models, right? Last year, I went to give a speech somewhere in Qatar. In Qatar, they have a license system that is based on your income. So you get a permit, and based on what your income is, they say 10% of your income you can buy worth. So they make sure that you cannot become profligate, you cannot become an addict, and they track who buys. You have to show an ID and buy. It's equal to putting a fingerprint on the. Now here's a country where we ask people to put fingerprints to buy rations, to get free rice. Why should we not ask about alcohol? So there are a lot innovative, effective ways where we can manage this better. But again, I'm just talking ideas. I'm just talking conceptually. The Chief Minister will tell us at the right time what we need to do and how we need to get there, and we will get there. But I can guarantee you that we are not a state that is perceived in the media. It's not true. We don't need TASMAC to survive. I'm saying we've lost 70,000 crores in other revenue. We get 30,000 crores from TASMAC. Surely that's not the basis, right? So there's a lot of different answers to this, but we got to figure out a lot of different nuances to this. We'll figure out the best way. I'm confident with the leadership of the Chief Minister, we'll figure out the best way in this term. Before this 5-year term ends, we'll figure out a much better way.
That's the promise we'll hold you to. And we have only 1 or 2 more questions and we'll wrap up. Aishwarya, are you there to ask the question?
Hello, sir. I'm Aishwarya. I head research at Ola Mobility Institute. We are a policy research and social innovation think tank. My question to you, sir, is about mobility. Within minutes of taking oath, the Honorable Chief Minister announced that women and girls in Tamil Nadu would be able to travel for free in public transportation. Do you expect to extend this scheme to transgender students, the elderly as well? Because this is a great inflection point to increase the participation of the marginalized in the economy. An associated question is, sir, what is the vision you might have in terms of making Tamil Nadu a leader in all things mobility, right from accelerated adoption of electric mobility or artificial intelligence in mobility, sir?
Well, very rapidly, 3 or 4 things. One, Chief Minister already extended it to transgenders within 2 days or 3 days on request. 2, our estimate is about, it costs us about 1,200 crores a year, or roughly thereabouts, what we would have otherwise gotten revenue. 3, it's no secret that the transport corporations run at a loss of something like 14 or 15 crores a day, and so several thousand crores a year. They need to be fundamentally restructured and reconfigured. It is my vision that I told the Chief Minister, I hope he allows me to work towards it, that we can run one of the best public transportation systems in the world, borrowing from the lessons of other places, the Scandinavian countries and other places, which will improve the or reduce the carbon footprint, improve the environmental outcome, plus provide a quality service, plus not have all these open litigations and thousands of crores in unpaid pensions and losses and all stuff. Let me put it another way. The state's finances cannot be fixed unless we fix 3 problems. 1, the electricity board problem. 2, the transportation corporations problem. And 3, the TWAD and the metro water problem. All these are huge, huge loss makers to the tune of tens of thousands of crores or thousands of crores a year. Not because we want to tax people, not because we want poor people to pay for water and all that, but we have no idea what happens and how it happens and where it happens. There was already a scheme that was in partnership with the World Bank. It was called the Chennai City Partnership. There was some pressure on me to sign an agreement in the last couple of weeks. I felt that it was too premature. I felt that we had not fully understood the implications. So I took it upon myself to ask the Chief Minister that I want to defer it. And then the World Bank said, well, but that means into the next year. So anyway, so I called for a conference call with the World Bank, explained the situation and told them, as much as we value your relationship and as much as we see you as kind of the blue tick mark that tells us we are good investment risk, our vision is for investment at a much, much bigger scale than this few $100 million. And as an ex-banker, as an ex-market participant, to me, building credibility, building consistency through your actions, including not taking the money when you're not sure how you're going to use it or whether it's the right thing to do, is how you build investability, right? So we have a longer term vision and a much bigger scale goal. And so my understanding of the markets is that trust drives a lot of these things, and trust drives relationships, and relationships drive investments. And so we're going to defer this. And so finally they agreed and we deferred it. So there are a lot of plans, but these are the 3 big, both financial and infrastructure problems of Tamil Nadu. And we have some vision. Again, I'm confident that if we're given time, we can do a lot of good things on this.
Thank you. So we are done with the member questions, as in we cannot take any more. We're going to quickly end with one question from me and Pooja. My question to you is a controversial subject. It's about Jaggi Vasudev. I don't have the regular question of what will the government do? Will you take action? I'm very curious, as a person who has covered God-men, spiritual men, women, and politicians. I've always noticed that politicians do not take on God-men and spiritual people because it's just easier not to do it. Why did you make that choice of speaking out? And second, if at all a scheme like this Kaveri calling, Rally for Rivers, which is camouflaged in goodness, is to come, would you be very circumspect as the finance minister to take it on? Because I'm sure there is another one in the office.
Yeah, listen, nobody goes courting controversy, right? So I'm going to be very, very brief because I don't want to, just because you ask, I don't want to end in another controversy. I didn't know who Jaggi Vasudev was or he existed till I saw an audit report of the government of India. The CAG puts out all the audit reports, not the state of Tamil Nadu. So CAG's audit report shows there is serious violation in the Isha Foundation's constructions in Coimbatore. That is how I even came to know that Isha Foundation exists. Otherwise, I know nothing about Jaggi, I know nothing about Isha. I don't know anybody in the setup. I don't know anything. So all I did was make a statement. And though the PSC proceedings are somewhat confidential, I found that a lot of office bearers were kind of trying to bend and sway and not answer correctly. And so I started getting very, very upset. And I said, either the CAG is right or the CAG is wrong. If the CAG is right, don't give me all these, no, they didn't really get the facts. No, they didn't. Then, of course, it became clear that the facts were right because Isha Foundation itself wrote letters to the government asking for regularization, asking for exemptions, asking for all kinds of things. So I am not in a position to judge, who is who and who is what. I am just saying that there are violations. These violations are documented. For something to get into a CAG report, it has to go through 1 year of review between the state government and the AG's office and not get resolved. And only then it gets inserted. And then it has to go to the one human being, CAG in Delhi, and that person has to sign off the report and then come back and then get placed on the table of the House. So this was not done in some random, fly-by-night manner. So the facts are the facts. Now, where this controversy really started was that a journalist came to my office from a newspaper and asked me that they want to interview. Now, I have been very, very circumspect, as you know. You've been calling me for over a month before I accepted this call. So I have literally this morning, I checked with my team, I have about 27 backed up interview requests and video and newspaper and magazine and YouTube channels and so forth. So in that interview, I talked about many things, including they asked me, this whole question of is this right or wrong? Now, that newspaper chose to split and post those as two different interviews. They chose to put the first part of the interview about the finances of the state on one day, and then 3 or 4 days later, they put the remaining part of the interview. And then, of course, all the, the usual suspects, for lack of a better word, started coming out of the woodwork and saying, no, he's wrong, he's this, he's that. And I said, listen, the facts are the facts are the facts. I posted on my social media handles the images of the public document CAG reports and the Isha Foundation accepting that they were in violation and asking for regularization. And yet people started saying a lot of Now, let me be very personal here. I grew up in a family where we didn't understand the concept of caste, right? We came from the self-respect social justice movement. I grew up in a family where we were well off enough that we didn't worry about other people's wealth. When my children once asked me, how rich are we? I said, I'm rich enough. I don't care about how rich anybody else I interact with. I treat them the same way, whether they're the richest person or the poorest. It doesn't affect my life. I am self-contained financially. That's rich enough for me. So in that context, and particularly as a public servant who has gone and stood in every door in every house, irrespective of party affiliation, and asked for votes, surely humility is the quality of a politician, is a kind of founding quality of a successful politician. You cannot win election without that. Especially if you, like me, you don't pay money. So I have no problem with that. But I have two weaknesses, and I admit them. I get riled up like nothing when people who are not that intelligent start pretending they're super smart and trying to put other people down. Bothers the crap out of it, number one. Number two is holier than thou guys who are vile human beings. I don't want to go into the names, but you know the names. These vile human beings who have no value system, no compunction, who have a history of violence, of theft, of bad cases against them, then start pontificating as if they are the agents of God. That again really riles me up. And I feel it's my duty as a citizen to expose these kind of evil people. And I don't want to sound like a fanatic, but there is such a thing as intolerable to me. And those are the only two categories. Those two categories really get my kind of goat. And so I must still learn, because I'm a minister now, I must still learn to ignore that. But
you should give us headlines. You shouldn't learn.
No. What's good for you is not good for me. Yeah. Of
course. Yeah. Pooja, we'll end this. You have anything to ask?
Yeah, I just want to ask you, you speak about federalism, very vehemently. As per you, what is the biggest threat to federalism in India today? One issue.
I think the biggest threat is behind us. The biggest threat was this notion of one nation, one X, where they could get everything homogenized and standardized across a country of such great complexity, historical diversity, tremendous difference in outcomes in GDP and social development and education and health. And so this notion that at one point when they seemed invincible and they felt no check or no constraint and they were running roughshod, everything from Food Security Act to education policy to labor policy to farm bills to citizenship to whatever they thought they could get away with. They pushed and they pushed and they pushed and they pushed. Now, again, I may be a couple of years early. I hope I'm not. But I can see that the pendulum has started to swing back. Now, people are realizing that if this is the result, then maybe the concentration of power and this homogenization of policy was not really that great after all, right? And so maybe I'm just an eternal optimist, but I feel like the greatest threat to federalism is already behind us. The last 7 years, and in particular the last 2 years, and particularly the post-19, 12 months before the kind of pandemic, or roughly 12 months before the pandemic, was really when the kind of myth was at its peak, when the cultish kind of, mind-numbing followership was at its peak. And I can see that even my good friend Rajesh Jain of this Prashnam survey, I don't know if you've seen, Rajesh Jain, who was once instrumental in getting Mr. Modi's social media and campaign and the Niti Center and all that done for him between 10 and 14 when Mr. Modi when Modi ji became Prime Minister. Rajesh Jain has done a survey with the Prashnam, and it's fascinating and was quoted in The Economist magazine this week. And among the questions they asked, they were trying to estimate the actual death rate, because we all know the official death statistics are wrong. But when they were trying to estimate the actual death rate, they asked a question: who do you blame for this outcome? And it was surprising. About 50% said the union government and Mr. Modi, and about 25 or 30% said the state government, and the rest said it's my fate, it's nobody's fault. But that to me tells me that I'm not that far ahead. I'm ahead of the curve, I always am. And that's not a good thing. I'm not saying it in a bragging way. I'm saying the smart politician is the one who can smell today. I can't do that. I'm a bit ahead of the curve. But I don't think I'm that far ahead of the curve, because I can see data that suggests that this is not a sustainable kind of. The pendulum is on the way back. Let's put it that way.
The pendulum is on the way back is what PTR has to say. Thank you very much for joining us. I just want to tell our member Malavika Raghavan, I'm sorry we could not take your questions. We had more questions. And PTR, if you can see, many people are writing in the comments, excellent session, and at least 3 people have written, have PTR as a guest twice a year. So we will be coming back to you after 3 or 4 months.
I'm sorry, between talking to you and watching the clock, because I have to get on TV at 8 o'clock, I haven't read any of the comments, but I'll take your word for it.
Yes, so.
No, but we're trying to sneak in a commitment from you for another interview sometimes.
Sure. At some point, sure. Yeah. After I present the budget. Much. After we finish the governor's address and the budget presentation, then after that, sure.
We'll hold you to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone. Please tell everyone that you know about TNM membership. Independent media needs your support more than ever, especially the News Minute. So please do support us. Please do spread the word about the membership. And we are also running a COVID-19 reporting project. You can check that out on the site and contribute there and share our stories. Thank you. Have a good night.